Yes. And this is the first of 3 of these modeling clinics we're doing. This is the first time we're running these, so we're gonna figure this out together. But since we have a set topic for this one already, do we wanna let Siobhan take it and talk about what's exciting to model around research expeditions?
I'm happy to do.
Let's do this.
Okay. Basically, I've been working with a range of international folk who, a lot of whom are actually on the call today, and we've been attempting to model research expeditions because in Wikidata, because we want to use Wikidata and set a standard for the TAGWIG community, which is the Biodiversity Information Standards community, and do documentation for them so that there's a standard as to how to put in research expeditions data into Wikidata for natural history institutions the world over. So we're trying to get it so that we're all agreeing as to how we should model the data before we start jumping in and actually shoving data into Wikidata. And one of the issues that we've got, and I'll just put the link to the schema actually that we've come up with so far. It's still under discussion. I will put it in the chat. One of the main things we've sort of most of the issues out, but one of the main issues is when you've got a series of expeditions. And it's an instance of subclass of issue. And I always have difficulty with these because I end up thinking myself into the circular going down the drain as to which one it should be. So for me, the issue, at the moment, this is done 2 ways in Wikidata. We've got one way where it's an instance of series of research expeditions. So it's in the normal sort of tree, and you go instance of, and then on that property you can go part of and come away with an individual item for each expedition that's part of the series, as it were. But I've also seen in Wikidata that people say subclass of expedition. And to me, that's not as elegant, but I just wanted the community to weigh in and give me some guidance as to what would probably be the most appropriate way of dealing with that particular issue. But generally, I would also like the community to have a look at the wider schema and just kick the tires and see if there's anything that we've got in there that anyone disagrees with, that there's something that's not. Yeah, well, that's what I thought, Andrew. Andrew's saying subclass of expedition doesn't seem right on the first glance. That was my gut feeling, but I'm not confident enough sometimes to go, right, I'm going to change everything in Wikidata before I actually sort of consult with the community. Yeah. So that's reassuring because you're the second or third person who said that to me. So I may just end up going and doing it now. Yeah, but the other thing is I was saying I want people to go and kick the tires of our schema and have a look at it. And if you're interested, I will also share my 18-page notes document on the actual, that's the Google Doc because we're collaborating, that's the Google Doc we've been using. I basically put all my thoughts down, and this is where people have been discussing some of the issues we've been having. The reason I'm bringing it out there is because although plenty of the people in our group have been editing Wikidata, I also like to consult with the community before we go ahead and start, because there's only at the moment about 400 research expeditions, and there are people chomping at the bit to start actually pushing this data into Wikidata. So we want to make sure that the schema is at least relatively okay and agreed on before we start doing this. But don't feel like you have to read the 18 pages all at once.
It seems like you've thought a ton about this already.
Oh, we've had lots of meetings. Because we want to make it a data standard internationally for all natural history institutions, We want to make sure it's modeled properly. And then also we can then use the Wikidata item in turn to be able to, I can't remember the exact, it's a Darwin core property, and it's term, and it's, oh gosh, I can't remember. Sorry, it's 4 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand, and my brain still isn't quite getting into gear. It's in the document anyway. It's a particular property that you can use to use the Wikidata item in for that. Yeah, that's right. Event ID. Thanks. Yeah, Wiki's put it in there. Parent event ID. That's the where we'd use the Wikidata item. So this is one of the reasons why we want to make sure that the schema is good, so that when we put the data into Wikidata, it's beautifully structured, so that then it can be reused, the item can be reused and to link to other things, not just participants, but also it's often used to link to natural history specimens or anthropological specimens in databases. Yeah. So if anyone's got any thoughts, please jump in. Feel free to comment in the Google Doc. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Tom. I will take that away. Thank you. Tom's just suggested that I have a look at the basic membership properties to give me a bit more assistance. Yeah. Anyone else got anything? I mean, feel free to unmute yourself and just chat. I can see Sabine, Sabina's one of my colleagues on this group, we've been working together on this. I mean, same with Joaquin, and I'm pretty sure Nikki's here as well. Oh, question on the project paper. You're not using list of. Okay. I'm not a project page designer, nor do I haven't had anything to do with that. Feel free to edit it however you like. Sorry, I don't know. Yeah. No specific reason as far as I'm aware.
I love how comprehensive this is. I'm getting lost in the document at the moment, so excuse me if I'm be quiet.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad someone appreciates my absolute going to town on this project. Yeah. I did. I think I shocked my colleagues when they said, "I think we need to start having a document that starts summarising our thinking." And then I said, "Oh, well, what do you know? Here's 18 pages I've already done." Yeah.
And about your initial subclass of, or not subclass of, issue, have you looked at how the data is currently modeled? Is it like a weird mix of everything, or?
Yeah, at the moment it's modeled because there's very, well, in comparison, few items. I mean, 400 is not that many, 400 to 500. It's not too bad. I've actually got a query. Let me just find it, which shows you it. I'll just grab the query.
It looks like
someone's ahead of me.
Also doing Sparker queries.
Yeah. Okay.
Nikki too.
Okay, so that's one query about subclass query, I think. Let me just check. Yeah, that's this currently. Well, last I checked, there were 13 subclasses of research expeditions, and so you can start seeing there's not that many I would need to change, but I just didn't want to change anything until I had a bit of reassurance. It's part of me just not feeling confident in my subclass instance of thoughts.
So Nikki is saying,
only, I'll manually change it as soon as I get agreement. I'll just go and do it. It's not a big change. Yeah.
Research expedition series subclass of expedition doesn't sound right to me. That would mean something that is an instance of the series is also an expedition. But I would have thought that the series is a group of expedition, not a type of expedition.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It sounds to me like you have the agreement you were.
Yay, thank you. That's what I wanted. Because my document I color coded my document to, green, which is straightforward, Orange, we've had some discussion on it. Red, I really don't know quite what I want to do here. And this was the only red one. So I'm very, very happy. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Go ahead, whoever wanted to talk. Sorry, that just flashed in front of my screen.
It's sometimes just weird because Jitsi combines the button to raise your hand and to send a reaction.
Cool,
so
cool.
sometimes people misclick.
Oh, Wakim, you can unmute too if you like. I invited the whole team along.
Share for people who are not familiar with GBIF what we want to achieve with this circular data sharing. And so I shared a specimen page shared on GBIF that uses a Wikidata identifier of a research expedition. So just an example of how all this goes wrong. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm considering, thanks for that. One of the things I'm considering doing is actually doing a Wikimedian in residence at Te Papa, our national museum, attempting to do a pilot project, putting the schema into action. So yeah, I'm in the process of discussions with Te Papa, and then we'll put a funding application into the Wikimedia Aotearoa New Zealand for it. But basically to start actually implementing this in a pilot project with the view of coming out at the other end of it with documentation about how to go about actually getting someone in your institution to actually find this data, because a lot of the time the data will be not as comprehensive as you think in a collection management system. A lot of the time it's actually you have to go and research it. It's a manual process a lot of the time, extracting it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's an interesting comment. Frederick said, regarding the first modelling challenge, the field of work modelling approach sounds like a much learners and more flexible route than creating complex subclass tree. That's what we came down to as well. We've decided this was another thing with instance of. We were thinking, well, sometimes institutions actually want to describe the type of research expedition. And so we were thinking, should it be a botanical collecting expedition, a fossil collecting expedition? But we decided that subclass side of things was not going to work. It just would make it way too messy, particularly for those research expeditions where it was where they're doing multiple things. So instead, we decided to use the property field of work to try and make sure that we encapsulated that sort of data via that property rather than splitting it up. Yeah. But again, don't feel like you have to read the whole 18 pages right now. But I'd be very grateful if anyone puts any comments in there as well.
So this is Andrea again. I just wanted to ask about this whole series of collection of modeling problem again. That like this happens a lot, like with events, like there was a riot and, this store got burned and that store got broken into. So the riot is one thing and all the sub events are another thing, and you make them parts of, or, there was a series of murders that happened, as a revenge thing or something. But you want to know that there was a series of murders, or that there was an exhibition, you're going after the series and you're going after the kind of series that it is. And I hate to think that we'll be creating, this whole deep hierarchy of subclassing expeditions that are a series of expeditions versus this is a one-off thing. But then what happens when the one-off thing turns into a series? There's a lot of times when you're in a learning environment and you think you're going to have one workshop, and all of a sudden it turns into a whole series of workshops. And that was one of the things I kind of was thinking about for the talk on that I was giving, of how do you actually classify this without creating these really deep and complex and duplicated subclassing trees everywhere.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that we've actually sidestepped that by saying, you know, it's an instance of series of expeditions, and then you do, you know, say it's I don't have an example off the top of my head. So it's something called the Arnold expeditions, where Arnold and his mates went collecting botanical specimens for 3 years, each different expedition in 3 different countries. So you can have an instance of Arnold expeditions, and then you have part of and has part. You use those properties to then do that. And to me, that makes is more elegant than, and not as confusing as the subclass way of doing it.
Yeah, but is the series that's defined as a subclass of series?
Yeah, good point. I see at the moment it's defined as a subclass of expeditions.
See, and that means then that everybody who wants a series of something, you know, a series of murders that were revenge acts or something, you start making all these subclasses. And one of the things I was kind of thinking about or wanted to talk about was, does it make more sense to just make it multiple inheritance that says it's both an exhibition and an expedition and a series?
Right.
And use the multiple.
I see your point, but I don't know the answer. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. That was one of the things I had as a question that I would, because my background is ontologies, I would do it that way and use multiple inheritance and say, if you're looking for series, you can find the series. If you're looking for expedition, you can find the expeditions. That may also be series. If you want to disallow it and say, I want the series, all the series that are expeditions, and then what they're a part of, it makes the Sparkle queries nicer, you know?
Yeah, well, and obviously I want to make sure that happens, because people will be querying this data. I can guarantee you, people will be querying the data. So how would you? Okay, let me find because at the moment the series expeditions item is really sparse. Like I think it's got one statement in it, and I just did it to try and come up with a. Let me see if I can find it. Research expedition series. Yeah, so at the moment I've got it as subclass of expedition, and that's the only statement on that item. So I will put the link in the chat. There we go. So if you've got any suggestions how to actually improve that, I'd be very grateful.
So I just put in the chat, I was kind of thinking you had a class called series, and this was more probably for the community in general, that you then use to additionally document the type of the class. So it is an expedition, but it's also just a series. And because one of the things that makes this almost impossible to use in like semantic web is that you have to, the computer has to know all these idiosyncrasies, and that doesn't work very well.
Okay, I'm looking and I can't see an item that looks like that. I mean, there's
no. I don't know that there is. But
okay.
That's one of the. the things that I'm kind of thinking about is do we have a good top level for Wikidata that people can use like this, as opposed to, use it with multiple inheritance, because multiple inheritance is clearly there. It's not always used correctly, but it's there. Could we maybe make some improvements like that, and then it doesn't make what you currently have wrong, but it could help.
Shivan, for me to understand, but you have the individual expedition and then the series, right? And like conceptually, the series itself is not an expedition, right?
Well, it could be, though.
It can be, yeah, it can be.
Okay.
So what happens is maybe people go out and do a research expedition, but they do it every single year, the same thing every single year. So it is a research expedition, or it's
Okay.
Ooh.
But then the concept of the list of like 5 of those expeditions is not in itself an expedition. That is
exactly
a list.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
so how
it's actually a different kind of problem, because if you think about it, that a person knows, or I'm going to go back to murders because it's easy. I know that 5 people got murdered yesterday in Baltimore or something. And you don't know any of the details, but you want to say that there was a murder and there were 5 murders, and you don't want it's not an arbitrary series, it's a bunch of murders. And if you want to dig down into the parts of them, you have those details, you can get them. But if I can't say that there were 5 murders without making a subclass of series or a subclass of murder, then you always have to have the specifics, and you don't always. You might know the generalities. And so that's kind of this weird dynamic that happens when you're trying to capture this arbitrary knowledge. So I might know about the Archibald expeditions, but know nothing about them. And I want to find all kinds of expeditions, but you may not, they happen from 1922 to 1927. I have no other detail, but I know that there was a bunch of them, right? I'm going to shut up because other people want to talk.
Somebody say was that sometimes expeditions happen within expeditions. I think I heard this that's the point, right? So if you go on an expedition to Western Europe, you might also go on an expedition to France and also on an expedition to Spain. But one expedition is part of another expedition, right? Like you set out on your boat and you get to Western Europe, and then you had a sub-expedition. But you don't really have a concept of sub-expedition as a property that you can just use. So I think that's kind of it, is maybe a better example of where the modeling is hard than you went on 6 expeditions, 1 each year for that's the series. But if you have this kind of thing where you go to Antarctica, but then you also do an expedition to the South Pole while you're in Antarctica, it's like a fringe or side event. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Part of sounds quite tempting though, right? From the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point, Nicholas. Okay, so Nikki put in up in the chat a long time ago now, because I just went and looked at it. Do you mean this? And actually, I'll copy it again and stick it in the chat again. A series ordered by a set of similar objects, and I think I do mean that. So I've actually added that to the where is it gone? got too many tabs open as usual. Research expedition series, but we still have people are making a really good point saying is a series is a series of research expeditions actually an expedition or not? And so I hadn't even thought of that. So thanks. I've now got something else to think about.
Have we successfully made it even more complicated?
Well done.
Go us.
I knew it was going to be difficult anyway. So yeah, I don't know quite what to do about that. So if anyone could help me with that one now, that'd be great. Whether we could continue to call it an expedition or not is a good point. It's a really good point. It's a really good point, and I don't know how to solve it. So what I've done is at the moment, research expedition series is now a subclass of expedition and series. So
I think Nicola has excellent advice. That at one point it's time to stop digging deeper.
As usual, fabulous advice. Classic. Yeah, that's a good point, Tom.
I was going to say this might be a really good opportunity for people to who are still interested in this topic to add their names to the Etherpad. And so maybe you can continue this conversation on in another space.
Yeah, I better leave space for anyone else who wants other problems, because I think there was Margaret had one other one in there as well. So thanks everybody. I appreciate the help. And if anyone's got any comments on either the proposed schema or anything else, you can either leave it in the Google Doc or you can leave it in the talk page on our Wikidata Wiki project research expeditions. And I appreciate the help. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the middle of the night.
Yeah, thanks.
The question I had was, I've been looking at natural monuments, and there are a lot of natural monuments that are specific trees or forests, and typically they're forests of a particular species. And I have not managed to put that in successfully. When I put up an image, obviously I can say depicts Pinus densiflora, but I can't see how everything I try to put in. I mean, I think it's an instance of, the tree that is actually the natural monument. I think it's an instance of Pinus densiflora, but I get a rude, an exclamation mark if I put that in. And I'm not sure just how to model it, because every particular, there's an instance of remarkable tree, which seems to fit quite nicely for the tree that is a natural monument. But there's no, and obviously any particular tree is a particular species. So it would be nice to identify it, but I can't see how to do it nicely. And similarly with forest, there's a number of natural monuments that are also forests. And again, they've been nominated as natural monuments because they're forests of a particular species. But again, I can't see how to put it in, just hoping for some guidance. Sorry, it's really a trivial question in comparison to Siobhan's effort.
This is what these sessions are for. And Nikki suggested we normally use heritage status for things like that.
I've used heritage designation, but the thing is, typically, I've been looking at Korean data. Typically, there's just the common name, so it's not. It takes some hunting to work out what the actual species is in terms of its scientific name. So it's not easy to put that in as a reference anyway. But I also don't. It's not part of the heritage designation. It's just that it's a particular tree or a particular forest. And it certainly doesn't, while the species is named with its common name in the heritage designation, I suppose you could put it there. So you think it should be a qualifier?
I don't know if it should be a qualifier. Maybe Nikki can clarify in the chat. Jan also suggested individual of taxon as a property.
Ah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, have we solved it?
That only deals with the monument that is a specific tree. What about a forest?
Good question.
Yes, I've got instance of forest. That's fine, but I want to specify that the forest is a forest of Pinus densiflora. I want to nominate what species that forest is because it's been designated partly because it's that species. It's not, or it may be a mixture of things, but you know, it's described as in part of the heritage designation, it's described as a forest of such and such type tree. And it just seems to be such a fundamental part of the description that I'd like it to go into the Wikidata. Yes, you know, it's nominated. Obviously, forests contain all sorts of things, but it's nominated because it's, you know, it contains that particular species.
So some more suggestions are forest has part of the class species. Then there's some question around, is it really one species?
Forest has part of the class. Sorry, do you want to put that in the chat or something? Or I'm not quite sure.
It is from Chuka, from earlier.
Sorry, I'm not sure what the answer is that you're giving.
I was just reading out what Chuka was suggesting earlier in the chat, which is forest has parts of the class species.
Doesn't seem. I'm not sure about that at all. Taxon found at location. That's a thought. Oh, yes. Typically, the forest will have a single coordinate for the forest, which of course is very peculiar. But never mind. It's how things go. P6569. Thanks, John. P2670. Okay, I'll have a look at those and see whether I'm happy with them, because I mean, it's so silly, it's just ridiculous. There's another question I've got. It's, oh no, don't worry, it's about massacres. Seems that they go, I found one of them. One was target and the other was, but I wondered why it needed something entirely different from participant. I first of all tried participant and it whacked up an exclamation mark. Wasn't sure, is there an entity schema for massacres?
I don't think I've seen one yet, but
Go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, I just wanted to say that typically if you study linguistic event theory, that events typically have, and even semantic role labeling for natural language processing, for events you really want to distinguish the actor in the event versus who's affected by the event. You know, so there's this, who's the patient, or what's the theme, and then you distinguish the theme of the event. You know, like there's a rally in support of some politician. That's the theme. Then you have the participants, but then, you know, who's affected might be the people in the neighborhood who are complaining about it, and participant in is usually not enough. And I think, Margaret, that's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. I was sort of happy with what I'd found, but I then hunted for massacres, and they're fairly badly modelled as far as I can see. They mainly just have an instance of, and not even a location or people or times. So it was interesting. Obviously, people have not been interested in querying them, so the Wikidata is very poor. If you just query massacres, you know, instance of massacre, I got 2,316, which is probably well short of what it ought to be. And the first couple I tried were, you know, probably pretty famous massacres, because they certainly had lots of wiki links, but no Wikidata, essentially. So yet another thing that probably needs an entity schema, I suspect.
Could you please try not to laugh when discussing murders or massacres, please? Thank you.
Sorry.
All right. Have we given you
Yes,
enough
you've given
input
me
to digest for now?
Thanks very much, Lydia. Thank you.
You're welcome. Frederick. Or was that an accidental hand raise?
Mic on and my camera on. Good. Can you hear me? So the first challenge that Soban presented is very similar to what I've experienced in the past when trying to describe a word. And sometimes people can go into very, very, very granular subclass hierarchies that seem to never end when this can be dealt otherwise. But field of work, as it is defined, is the field of an organization or a person. When you try to, I mean, we can, no one is preventing us from using it on other kinds of items, but the description of it is not inviting users to do so. And so I've had multiple discussions with other Wikimedians and two property proposals. Is it okay to keep you extending field of work beyond what it was initially created for? Or do we at some point need another property, or some people have even suggested merging field of work and field of disoccupation?
So I would say it can go either way, but we already have so many properties, and even in the discussion here, we've heard a lot of confusion about which property to use when they're so close. And it also makes it harder for people who want to query it, right? Potentially. So I personally would be a bit cautious with splitting even more, unless we have a very good reason for it.
I'm not proposing splitting even more. Instead, the latest property proposal that I offered was actually a super property on top of field of work and field of this occupation, so that eventually these property could converge and be queried no matter which one is used.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So yeah, I thought I'd chime in there because I thought I had not seen the field of item proposal before. So thank you, Frederick, for pointing to that. And I think it would solve a lot of problems, at least for the things that I was interested in doing the modeling days for. So the other related problem was that we have a huge list of museums, but not a great way of describing what the museum covers, right? So that would be like the equivalent of a field of work or a field of the museum. So should we have a subclass for every type of museum, a historical museum, a African American history museum, whatever? So it's the same type of issue. But I do worry that the field of item proposal, which I think would be very useful, would be so overly broad that it wouldn't be able to map to other ontologies well, right? So that's what I do worry about. And the more you look into it, a lot of our properties were actually derived from a lot of glam work, like related to artworks, and they have been expanded beyond that to probably be not the proper use of those fields anymore. So for example, the main subject was originally main subject of artwork or main subject of a work. But we have a need for these type of properties being used beyond a work, right? It might be an institution, an expedition, these type of things. So I do wonder about that. Yeah, and in the chat also genre is about movies and works. But we have an increasing need for modeling organizations and expeditions and other things that the properties for these types of things are generally have been crafted in relation to artworks and works like that. So I do wonder about the efficacy of field of item. It kind of reminds me of part of, it's like useful, but maybe so broad to be not that useful in the end. That's just my main worry.
Anyone else have thoughts on that?
The reason I picked field of work, well, we ended up using, excuse me, that property in our schema for research expeditions is because of the way research expeditions were defined by libraries. Sometimes they're classed as organisations in their schema because their authors, although they're not real people, they are in their ontology can be classed as authors of scientific papers, for example. So yeah, it's just interesting having discussed with the library community how they go about describing research expeditions and then attempting to do the same in Wikidata. It's not quite how I would have thought it should be done, but I'm not going to argue with librarians. I'm going to follow what they do.
Frederick is asking if anyone knows which ontology field of work was borrowed from. Some hints you might find on the property proposal, which should be linked on the property inner statement. Maybe there's something. Otherwise, we consider it original invention of Wikidata right here.
Yeah, Lydia, I was just looking at the property proposal, but it doesn't seem to give much clue. And then I earlier chat that there's no equivalent property mappings for P101, which is really weird for a property that old. Someone should. It maps to this in Scouse or other things, but no one's made any mapping, which is very odd to me.
We have about 5 minutes left. Are there any specific things we want to do in terms of outcome or key takeaways? And yeah, Nicola also says it seems to be an invention. So yeah, I guess we count this as original. Frederick.
So if P101 was a Wikidata invention, I mean, we could decide to broaden its scope or give it a super property that would be broader in scope to address other use cases where field of work, as it is currently defined, would not be the best way forward.
Okay, judging from the chat, what to do after this session is to do some more digging for the actual proposal for this property. But regardless, this seems like something that you could bring up on the discussion page of the property and see if there's consensus on Wiki.
All right. If there is nothing else to add there, we can wrap up for this. Thank you so much for coming to our first clinic. There'll be 2 more, I believe, over the next 2 days. Amazing. If you want, you can stick around for the intro to entity schemas in 12 minutes, which I will be on as well. Thank you all for bringing such great topics. It was really, really interesting discussions. I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Bye-bye.